What's up guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you are new here, my name is Beth. I make videos all about motherhood and all things lifestyle, and today's video is one that you guys have been requesting literally now for months, like honestly 9 months, and it is how I got my baby to sleep through the night. I wanted to have like a little bit more time of having a baby under my belt before I made a video sharing about how I got her to sleep through the night, just because so much can change in the first year, and I wanted to make sure that like the things that we were doing were tried and true and worked over a number of seasons and regressions and all of that stuff. I finally sat down and wrote out all of the things that I wanted to share with you guys when it comes to baby sleep, what helped for us, what allowed our baby to get the sleep that she needed and us to get the sleep that we needed as well. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, then just keep on watching. So first things first, I do feel like I need to throw the disclaimer out there that I am not a baby sleep expert. I do not claim to be. I do not even claim to have figured these things out on my own. I did a lot of research and followed a lot of great accounts that I'll even get into a little bit more in this video. I'm not even like a seasoned mom of multiples that has done this multiple times. I'm literally a first-time mom, but I did do a lot of research and we have a great sleeper. And as easy as it is to attribute that to luck or just say that's just the temperament of your baby, my husband and I have very much had stages with our daughter where that was not the case, but we worked really hard and stayed really consistent with a lot of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you in this video. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think all of the things that I'm going to be talking about in this video did and actually continue to really contribute to how well she is able to sleep at night. And so with all that being said, let's dive right in. Now, I think that like what people consider sleeping through the night varies. In the early stages, I think sleeping through the night, like as a newborn, is anywhere from like 6 to 7 hours. And then when you get to like that 3 and 4 month mark, it becomes more like 7 and 8. And then past that 4-month sleep regression, when the chunks are getting a lot longer, it's more like 10, 11, 12 hours at night. But the first time that we got a 6-hour stretch from Vivian was at 4 weeks old. At this point, she was up over her birth weight and our doctor gave us the green light that we were okay to stop waking her up for feeds in the middle of the night. Yes, I was setting a timer on my phone or different alarms and actually waking her up to feed her because I was nervous about kind of missing that 3-hour feeding mark, but she was really doing well in terms of sleeping, and so our doctor was like, stop setting the alarms, allow her to just sleep and you guys get the rest that you need as well. By 6 weeks old, she was consistently sleeping at least 7 hours in the night, most nights. Now, it's important to note that not all babies are ready to do that at this age. I'm not like by any means saying that you should work to try and have your baby sleeping through the night at 4 weeks or 6 weeks or anything like that. That is actually not super normal. It is something that can happen and it's not unhealthy. Again, you really want to pay attention to your baby. In this video, I'm going to be getting more into like the 3 and 4 month age range because I think that that's when a lot of people do start to think more about things like sleep training and the different techniques that you use when it comes to helping a baby sleep at night. But our daughter did start sleeping at night really early, and it was obviously a combination of the fact that she was a little bit bigger as a baby, so she was exclusively breastfed, but because she was up over her birth weight really soon, and she was more, I guess, just like solid, I don't think she needed to wake to eat as much as maybe a preemie might, or a baby that's still kind of getting up to their birth weight might. And so make sure that you pay attention to your baby. Of course, everybody's baby is different. Typically, breastfed babies do need to wake up to eat a little bit more than formula fed babies do or bottle fed babies do, just because there is less of an awareness of how much they're actually getting, or they're often consuming less at each feeding. So all of that is factored into it, but that is when Vivian started sleeping through the night. As most moms that are watching this that have a baby that's even just a couple months older than a newborn would know, just because you get that like longer stretch for maybe one night or even a couple nights or even a couple weeks, it doesn't mean that you have arrived at like having a baby that sleeps through the night. As much as you work towards having consistency in those longer stretches of sleep, there are some things that are just going to impact that once in a while. If you're watching this and you are in a regression, know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and this is not forever for you and your baby. I just want to emphasize that as well, that there are always going to be things that interrupt it, but what's more important is that you have the tools in your tool belt and you know what to come back to so that your baby is getting good stretches of sleep most of the time. To break this video up, I'm going to do kind of like a newborn sleep chunk, a month's like 3 and 4 sleep chunk and then 5 months onward. But before I do that, I kind of want to go through a couple different things just as like a first and foremost, because I think that there are some things that even though they may have looked different throughout each of those stages, were really just consistent and important for us to be able to maintain throughout the newborn stage up until 9 months. And so I have like a whole list of things on my phone that I want to go through and kind of share with you guys. And the first thing is that I know you're probably wondering, we did not use or rely on the cry it out method to help Vivian sleep through the night. We don't have like an issue with cry it out or even an issue with people who choose to do it. You have to do what works for you and your family, and everyone's family is going to be different, and so there's absolutely no judgment here. But I think that people often think that like when we talk about sleep training or the things that I don't know why I'm doing quotation air marks so much. I think that when people often talk about sleep training, they think of crying it out automatically being it, where you leave your baby for like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, however long it takes for them to just fall asleep. And you do that like multiple nights in a row until eventually they figure it out. But there is so many different like ways that can look on the spectrum of like the Ferber method or just like the pause method and all these different things. And so there was never really a time that we relied on cry it out to help our daughter learn how to sleep. Typically the longest time that we would go before going back into the room, either myself or my husband in intervening in some way, was like 10 to 15 minutes. Instead of doing cry it out, we relied on consistent bedtime routines, watching wake windows during the day, and encouraging our daughter to self-soothe, which I will get into a little bit more in this video as well. And then the other thing that I mentioned that we used a lot was the pause method. So when we would hear Vivian crying, whether that was after being put down for a nap or being put down for bedtime, we wouldn't jump up and go into the room right away. We would give her a minute, we would pause, we would wait to see if she would figure it out on her own. And while sometimes she didn't, and we would eventually intervene and go in and comfort her or soothe her, a lot of the time she did actually figure it out, and now almost always we pause and she goes back to sleep. And so that is the first thing, is that we didn't do cry it out, but we did use the pause method. The next thing that I'll say, and I don't mean for this to be like controversial or anything like that, or to sound like judgy, again, everybody needs to do what's best for them, but what was best for us was encouraging independent sleep with Vivian. So things that we didn't do or we didn't do beyond like 4 weeks, 5 weeks old were contact napping. We tried to encourage Vivian to sleep independently almost all of the time. And then the second thing is co-sleeping. We found that she slept better and we also slept better when we slept independently, and also felt safer about that as well. And so those are two other things that are important to note. The next thing that was really critical for us through all of those stages was putting Vivian down drowsy but awake. And I would say like not even drowsy, but literally just awake. Of course, in the like very early stages, a lot of this is just like not gonna work, and it's just practice. And I also held Vivian for a lot of her naps. I feel like up until like the 5-week mark, I just feel like you can't really get that time back when they're like so tiny newborn. And I also was not concerned at all in that stage about like establishing healthy sleep habits or any of those things, because I knew that there was so much time to do that, and she was just such a little baby at that point. But as soon as we got to that like 5-6 week mark, we wanted to practice those independent naps in the bassinet. And so I would put her down while she was still awake so that she would have an opportunity to learn how to self-soothe. Again, I remember doing this, and like it was a joke between Jared and I, because we would see all of the baby sleep experts be like, drowsy but awake, put them down like while they're still awake. And we were like, yeah, like that's literally never gonna work. Like your baby's gonna cry, they're gonna want to be picked back up again. And a lot of the time in those early stages, that is what happened. But because we stayed consistent with it and we kept practicing at putting her down while she was awake, she did become really good at self-soothing and putting herself to sleep without any rocking, bum patting, feeding, any of those things that become like sleep associations. There's me doing the fingers again. That they need to eventually fall asleep on their own. One of the things that really stuck with me was something that I read, I think like on the Taking Care of Babies Instagram page, and she was basically just talking about why the drowsy but awake method is so helpful. And she was just talking about the fact that like, imagine if you as a person were like put to sleep in a certain way, like someone was holding you or rocking you or whatever, and then you woke up and that person person was gone and you were in a totally different room and like you didn't remember what happened. That's what it can feel like for our babies when we're always soothing them to sleep and then putting them down and leaving, and they're waking up on their own like, where the heck is my parents? So that's why we have always worked really hard at practicing drowsy but awake. So the next thing is that I and our family is very like pro sleep props and things that help a baby to sleep independently. So for example, I am very much pro swaddling when your baby is born up until 4 months or 3 months or whenever that first sign of rolling is. That's when it obviously becomes unsafe and you need to transition out of having arms in the swaddle immediately. But we very much found that swaddling was really helpful for Vivian to soothe when she was going down to sleep, and it really simulates that feeling of being in the womb for them, and so that was something that worked really well for us. The other like sleep props that we are huge fans of in this house are white noise, pacifiers, as well as having a lovey around like that 3 and 4 month mark to have just something that they can hold on to help them sleep as well. I often hear people say that they don't want to introduce white noise or they don't want to introduce a pacifier because they don't want to have to break that at some point or have a baby kind of rely on any of these things to fall asleep. But the other thing is like we all have things that we rely on as we fall asleep. Like I know for me, I need a dark room, I need it to be quiet, and so for my daughter to need like white noise, I think that's a totally okay thing. And the other thing is that there is so much time to break reliance on some of these things in the future, like the pacifier, and I would much rather my daughter get really consistent and deep sleep right now while her brain is developing and is in these really critical stages. She needs the sleep, we need the sleep, like recovering from postpartum, you need rest. If a pacifier is going to help you guys do it, then I say go for it. Again, there will always be time to break that reliance in the future, but anything that will encourage your baby to get that deep sleep, I think is a great thing to use to help your baby get what they need. If the prop or the like sleep association that you are using is actually impacting sleep in a negative way, so for example, you've introduced a pacifier, but your baby is actually spitting it out in the middle of the night and waking up unless you put it back in, then I would say that there's room to kind of figure out how you can wean that reliance a little bit. Like I've often heard that it could be helpful for you to go into the middle of the night and actually take the soother out yourself when your baby is sound asleep, and then just practice them learning how to sleep without that over time. But in our case, Vivian takes the pacifier. She only takes it before naps, so nap time and bedtime, and she'll spit it out while she's napping and she'll just keep sleeping after that. So we have never had an issue with any of that. Okay, so 2 more high level things before I go into each of the breakdowns. And the next thing is that wake windows are so key, especially in the first year, to having a great sleeper. So for each like age range, like months 1 and 2, 2 and 3, etc., there is age appropriate wake windows that are outlined by sleep experts, and you can find these on pages like Taking Care of Babies or Baby Sleep Doctor on Instagram. And essentially these outline what the ideal time awake for your baby is and what the ideal time asleep for your baby is in both the daytime and the nighttime. Essentially, by following these outlined wake windows for your babies by different age ranges, you can help to avoid having a baby that is overtired and a baby that is undertired, and all of those things will really impact how long of a stretch your baby is sleeping for, both in the day and at night. The last thing that is relevant for all of these different stages that really worked for us is creating an ideal sleep environment. So we want to create an environment that is very much conducive to sleep. You want a room that is dark, you want a room that is cool, you want a room that is boring. If there's too much exciting stuff going on, like above the crib, in the crib, you want a room that is really just conducive to sleep and feels calming for your baby. As adults, we often think about things that we would like in our room that would help us to sleep better, whether that's really cozy pajamas or comfy bedding, having the right blinds to block out the light at night, and we want to do these same things for our baby. As much as we would love for them to sleep in any environment all the time, they also need that environment that's going to help them get a really deep sleep. So I'm going to jump into newborn sleep and basically just share with you guys literally everything that I learned or used to get my baby to sleep well in that newborn stage, and basically just the philosophy around sleep and schedules in general. So first things first, in the newborn stage, you do not need to worry about routines or sleep associations or ruining your baby or anything like that. At this stage, what you really want to focus on is making sure that your baby's caloric needs are being met. During feedings, whether you are breastfeeding or bottle feeding, you want to make sure that baby is eating enough, that they are gaining weight, and a lot of that is what will impact their sleep ultimately. So newborns need to eat every 2 to 3 hours, and at this stage, they really need your help to figure out what night and day is, because they don't have a circadian rhythm yet and they rely on you a lot to figure out when they should be sleeping and for how long. Basically, a newborn that is sleeping all day is going to be up all night. You're going to want to cap those naps around the 3-hour mark. I do say that you should wake a sleeping baby if it's been past that 3-hour mark, because A, you want to feed them, you want to make sure their belly is full, but B, you also want to make sure that they're getting that sleep at night as well, because again, they don't know their own day and night. And so that's why I would always wake Vivian up around that 3-hour mark. So for Vivian, we followed the eat, play, sleep kind of breakdown in terms of schedule, and I got that from the book Baby Wise, which I will link in the description box if you want to check it out. But essentially, we would feed her every 2.5 to 3 hours and focus on achieving a full feed. So basically what that means is we would try and make sure that she wasn't just kind of snacking in between, but that she would eat and then she would play for a stretch of time, typically anywhere from 45 to 60 minutes as a newborn, and then she would go back to sleep again. Sleep could be anywhere from like 15 minutes to 3 hours as a newborn, but the best case scenario for her at this point was 1.5 to 2 hours. And then after she would sleep, she would wake up, she would eat again, and we would go back into that cycle of playing for 45 to 60 minutes, and that would be tummy time, it would be talking to her, it would be showing her around the house, reading books, all of these different things. But essentially we would follow that cycle of like every 3 hours we would wake up again, and that would allow us to have a little bit more structure to our day, but it also ensured that her caloric needs were being met and that she wasn't sleeping too much during the day so that we could get some of that nighttime sleep in as well. At this stage, we didn't worry too much about implementing a bedtime or like a bedtime routine, because again, we weren't super concerned about sleep associations in the newborn stage. I think it's good practice if you want to introduce it now. So I've heard that the best time for a newborn to go to sleep is anywhere from 8 to 10 p.m. We would often still have her like napping at 8 p.m. and her formal bedtime was closer to like 10 or 10:30. I would think that with future babies, we might try like for closer between that 8 to 10 mark, just to get into the habit of them going to sleep a little bit earlier. But again, like, don't worry too much about routines or associations at this point. You're basically just practicing and helping yourself and your baby get into just a healthy routine over time. During the newborn stage, we had Vivian sleeping in our room for the entire time. So she was in a bassinet beside our bed. And again, for like the first like 4-5-ish weeks, I had her in my arms for a lot of those naps, or like in arms of family members, of people that were visiting. But she always did sleep in that bassinet beside us at night. And then around that like 5-week mark was when we started putting her in the bassinet to sleep independently, just to practice getting into the habit of that as well. The other thing is that while we would try and do like the drowsy but awake method and put her into the bassinet for naps, a lot of the time that just like didn't work while she was a newborn. And so she would fall asleep on us, and then we would actually transfer her into the bassinet to continue that nap. And that would just allow me to be able to like essentially just not be nap trapped for the rest of the day, and just allow both of us to get into the habit of having that separation during her nap. So again, we got cleared by our doctor around the 4-week mark that Vivian was well above her birth weight and that she could start sleeping through the night for those 6-hour stretches. But everything changes when you hit the 3 and 4 month sleep regression. That is the kind of chunk that I'm going to go into next, is the 3 and 4 month sleep regression. And essentially what's happening during this stage is babies are shifting from a 2-stage sleep cycle to a 4-stage sleep cycle. So as adults, we have a 4-stage sleep cycle where we have light sleep, we have deep sleep, we have REM sleep. Babies don't have that as newborns. That's why they're able to literally sleep in a super bright room with a vacuum running and be totally passed out We can't do that as adults, and your baby can't do it either when they hit that 3 and 4 month age range. Because their bodies are going through so much while they're developing this circadian rhythm, that's why they're waking so much. And it's that paired with the fact that there is also typically a lot of developmental stuff happening in this age range. Babies are starting to learn to roll, and a lot of the time this will wake them up because they're ending up on their tummy in their crib and just absolutely freaking out. This stage, repetition and routine become so key for babies to learn what the precursors are to sleep. So this is when we really formally introduced a bedtime routine as well as a nap time routine, and made sure that we basically had that be a part of Vivian's kind of sleep process as much as possible. According to Taking Care of Babies, at that like 3 and 4 month age range, most healthy babies should be able to sleep for at least 4 hours in the night without a feeding if they are getting like an adequate caloric intake every 2 to 4 hours during the day. Developmentally, by 4 months, the AAP says that your baby can sleep for an 8-hour stretch and be totally healthy and normal, but it's also totally healthy and normal if your baby is not yet doing this at this stage. So there is a ton of variability in the 3 and 4 month age range, and again, that's when a lot of that routine and repetition becomes so important. So it was around month 4 that we transitioned Vivian from the bassinet into the crib in her room, and to do that, essentially we started with just daytime naps, getting her familiar with that space and basically just practicing being in it, to the point at night where she was able to actually do that really comfortably. And as much as we wanted to keep her in our room for a little bit longer, she was really outgrowing the bassinet and she wasn't able to stretch out in it as much as she wanted to. But because she was also waking more in the night, she was a little bit more prone to hearing us wake or us stir and have that impact her as well. So making that transition into having her own space was really key in helping her get the sleep that she needed. So even with the transition to her own room and the introduction of like a formal routine, which I'll get into it in a little bit, we had a really terrible 4 month sleep regression. I've talked about it on this channel a couple of times, but basically for like five weeks, I would say, Vivian was taking, but basically for like 5 weeks, I would say, it would take us like 2 hours at night, like minimum, to get her to go to sleep. And that was with us going into her room after those like 10 and 15 minute intervals to soothe her and get her back to sleep. And she would also wake up like 3 or 4 times in the night. So all in all, it was just chaos, even though we had done and like were doing a lot of stuff to try and help her not have sleep in that way. But all I can say that worked for us is we stayed really consistent. We just put our heads down and we decided like we're gonna stick to this because eventually we know we'll see the results from it. And it was just a tough time, but we made it through by staying consistent. So there are 4 things that I would say were huge for us during that like 3 to 4 month sleep regression. And the first thing was, again, wake windows. Those are so key in helping your baby get the sleep that they need during the day and the sleep that they need at night. Short naps are like so characteristic for this like 3 and 4 month age range. Your baby's learning so much, they're having a harder time falling asleep during the day. But naps also don't really like solidify for babies until the 5 month mark. So I found that when we were trying to place too much emphasis on like bedtime and nighttime sleep and not enough emphasis on the daytime naps, that it was really impacting the nighttime sleep. And so I had to shift the perspective a little bit to make sure that we were really focusing on the wake windows during the day. When your baby is in that like 3 to 6 month age range, they will be happiest if you don't keep them up for more than 2 hours at a time and you allow them to take 3 naps a day that range anywhere from like 30 minutes to 2 hours. Of course, a lot of that is ideals and you're gonna have to work around those short naps, but if your baby is waking up from a really short nap, just try the pause again. Don't jump into their room immediately. A lot of the times they will fall back asleep on their own if you give them the space to do so. And make sure that before you're putting them down that they're not undertired or overtired during that like 2 hour stimulation when you have them awake. So after focusing on wake windows, the next thing that was super important for us during that 3 and 4 month age of getting good sleep was introducing the formal bedtime routine. So basically, I'm just gonna read to you guys everything that we did for our bedtime routine during this stage. So we would do bedtime anywhere between 7 and 8 p.m. Some nights this was as early as 6:30 p.m. depending on how she napped during that day, but 7 to 8 p.m. is the ideal kind of time frame for your baby to go to sleep in months 3 and 4. And every single night we would typically do a bath, but we wouldn't use soap every night. So to avoid her skin from drying out, sometimes we would just use water and have her play in the bath. But that sensory experience of like being submerged in water and having it be warm was really helpful for us in just kind of transitioning into bedtime. We didn't do it every single night, but we did use a bath most nights in her routine. And then we would bring her into her room where the lights would be dimmed. We would put on her sound machine. We would put her into her pajamas. She would get into her sleep sack. She would have her soother. We would give her her lovey, which is essentially kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. I'm just going to show you guys. This is Vivian's lovey. It is a little bunny that's kind of attached to this little like square thing. This is from Indigo. I'll link it in the description box, but she is absolutely obsessed with this thing. So we only ever give this to her before naps and before bedtime, and we introduced it during the 3-month sleep regression, and it was a game changer in helping her self-soothe at night. So after we would kind of give her all of those things, we would put her down awake, and then we would leave the room. After that point, she might cry immediately, she might cry 5 minutes later, and that was basically when we would go in every like 5 to 15 minutes and help her, either by picking her up and soothing her or just placing a hand on her and just letting her know that we were there and like everything was okay. Basically, Jared and I would go back and forth between just soothing her, and we would kind of like vary in terms of like sometimes we would go in and just give her the soother back, sometimes we would go in and like actually pick her up. But it would kind of depend on how long we had been going back and forth. And it's only been like 5 minutes. Just go back in there, like put your hand on their chest or their back, give them the soother, and let them know that they're gonna be okay. The other thing that we introduced during the regression was a dream feed. So around 10 or 11 p.m. after she had fallen asleep and was asleep for a little while, I would actually come into her room and I would just like lightly wake her up. Sometimes she wouldn't actually fully wake up and she would still be like mostly sleeping for these, but I would basically just sit down and I would feed her for like 10 or 15 minutes and she would go back to sleep, and she would sleep a longer stretch because she got that extra milk in her right before going to sleep, and so she wouldn't need to wake up for it in the middle of the night. So again, she didn't need that feeding before the 3 and 4 month sleep regression. So that's one thing that you might hear is people saying like, don't introduce a dream feed if you know your baby doesn't need it and their caloric needs are already being met. But for us, it worked really well. We were of the mind that like, if this dream feed for like 10 minutes is all it's gonna take for her to get sleep and us to get sleep again, like, we're gonna do it, and we will wean the dream feed later on when we need to. And again, we weaned it at like 6-7 months and it was totally fine, so there was no issue with that, but the dream feed was a game changer for us during the regression. The last thing that I'll say in months 3 and 4 before I get into like months 5 and onward is that a lot of what can cause interrupted sleep during this stage is babies actually practicing new skills in their crib. So one of the things that I mentioned is like your baby might be rolling over and waking up and actually like freaking themselves out a little bit. And for us, that was a lot of what was happening during the 3 and 4 month sleep regression for Vivian. So she would wake up on her belly and basically just be like terrified to be there. And so one of the things that we would do is during the day, we would make sure that we did a lot of practice of that skill so that she was getting that time in, and that she would be more inclined at night when she was waking up to either know how to do it already from the day or be like not concerned about practicing it in her crib because she got that practice during the day. So you can practice putting them on a blanket and rolling them back and forth and helping them just figure out how to get in and out of that position. But that's one of the things that worked for us, is just like practicing those new skills during the day. Okay, so that wraps up 3 and 4 months. I'm gonna go into the like 5 months and onward chunk now. I hope this isn't getting too long. This might just be a longer video in general because I feel like it's impossible to make a video on baby sleep without including all of these different things in here. But around the 5 month mark is when naps start to elongate. So essentially they're less inclined to take some of those shorter naps, although it is still normal if you're experiencing that around the 5 month mark. But characteristically, naps will start to deepen, become a little bit longer. Baby sleep can also range from anywhere between like 12 to 16 hours at this point. So you're able to see a lot more sleep from your baby in a total like 24-hour period. Some babies in this like 5 month and onward age range may still be waking to eat at some point, although they shouldn't need to wake more than once to eat at the 5 month mark. We weaned Vivian from the Dream Feed, I think somewhere between, I honestly can't remember, it was probably around 6 months that we like had her not eat at night anymore, and the final feed would be at 7 and she wouldn't eat again until 7 a.m. Again, that totally depends on your baby and how much they're eating. Still try and focus on making sure that they're getting enough feeds during the day and enough milk during the day so that their bellies are full when they go to bed at night. The other thing that's really important for this range is making sure that you continue to focus on age appropriate wake windows. So prioritize getting good naps as often as possible. If you want to do some naps on the go, like that's totally fine. You don't want to get yourself in a position where you feel like you can never leave the house because you're so chained to your baby's sleep schedule. But at this point, their sleep schedules do start to solidify a little bit more. You can kind of pinpoint a little bit better when their naps are going to be and how long they're going to be, which is also a great thing at the same time because you can plan your day around that more. But you also still want to stay flexible. So make sure you find what works for you. But I would say that as long as most of your baby's naps are at home in that dark, quiet room and they're getting good sleep like the majority of the time, then you're okay to be flexible outside of that. So when it comes to naps at this age, it also is important to not have nap times either be too long or too short. So essentially, you don't want to go over 4 hours of sleep during the day for a 5 to 7 month old, 3.5 hours of sleep for a 7 to 9 month old, or 3 hours for a 10 to 24 month old. Also want to continue to pay attention to your bedtime routine. So things like you also want to continue to pay attention to your bedtime routine. So things like having those precursors to sleep, whether that is a dark room or white noise or story time or a bath or any of those things that help to signal to your baby that sleep is coming, having those things for naps and bedtime is going to continue to help them get those longer stretches. Of course, your baby's going to continue to also have new developmental milestones, new leaps, different things like that happening beyond the 5 month mark. But I would say that a lot of what you have learned in that like 3 and 4 month age range and implementing that habit of like practicing new skills during the day is going to be really helpful for you. But also just sticking to what you know during all of those leaps and regressions is huge. So it feels like everything is kind of falling apart every time you hit a new regression or a new leap and you're like, oh my gosh, I thought we figured this out. But honestly, like you know what has worked in the past, you know what you need to do. And so just stay consistent. It may only last for a couple of weeks and you'll be back on track in no time. Just because they're now teething or you're going on vacation or they're sick or they're learning a new skill doesn't mean that you need to start from scratch. Just stay consistent, do what you need to do in terms of following those wake windows that are age appropriate, getting that bedtime routine in, and making sure that you are just giving your baby an environment that's really conducive to getting a deep sleep at night. I want to leave you guys with some of the resources that have been a game changer for Jared and I in helping to figure out all of this stuff because again, I did not invent any of this information. I did a lot of research to figure out what was going to work for our family and it has, and for that I have to thank Taking Care of Babies. I never did like the formal course or paid for any of the resources, but I did follow them on Instagram and got a lot of really valuable information from her there. She shares so much there, so make sure that you follow that account. The other one is Baby Sleep Doctor on Instagram. She shares a lot of really great information on all of this stuff. And then I think the last one that I followed was Seed Sleep. I'll link all of these in the description box so you can go and check them out. But those are the Instagram specific resources that were really helpful for us. And then in terms of books, the one that was most helpful for us, like transitioning into being parents and having a newborn, is Babywise. So basically most of what I shared in the beginning of this video when it comes to that newborn stage, I learned from the Babywise book. That's where Eat, Play, Sleep comes from, and basically that breakdown of like how to spend your day with a newborn to make sure that they're getting the right amount of sleep. And so be sure to check out all of those resources. This is not sponsored, but if I can help another mom out by getting good sleep at night, then that is a win for me. I want to end by just saying that no matter whether your baby is sleeping for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever in the night, you are doing a good job. I think it's so easy for moms to kind of compare themselves to other moms when it comes to sleep. For some reason, this has become like the hallmark of like whether or not you have a good baby or you're doing well with your baby. And it's like the question that people ask you all the time after you have a baby is like, are you getting any sleep yet? Like, are they sleeping through the night? And people will literally ask that when your baby is like 3 days old. So give yourself a lot of grace. There's time to figure figure this out and don't feel bad for wanting to get more sleep, even if it's just for you, because when you are a healthy mom, you can raise a healthy child and you need your own sleep to be able to do that. So don't feel selfish for wanting that. It's a good thing to get good sleep. It's a gift to your baby to allow them to get good sleep as well. And so implementing all of these practices is what really helped with us. I hope that this can help someone out there, whether you are in the trenches of sleepless newborn nights or the regression or any of those things. I hope this helps. If there's something that I didn't share in this video that you as a mom know worked really well for you, then please comment that down below so other moms can go and check it out and just get an idea of what they could try otherwise. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure that you give it a thumbs up before you head out today. Until my next video, I love you guys. I'm praying for you guys. I hope you are getting good sleep, and I will see you soon.